Picture a fifth grader in an auditorium in Colorado Springs. It's 1985 or 86 or something. The lights go down, the curtain goes up, and there on stage is a sixth grade class singing, "Anything you can do, I can do better." And there in the lineup is a kid named Aliza Kline. That legendary show, Broadway Comes to Steal. The fifth grader, let's call him Pete, was one of the MCs of that show. I know, that's hard to believe. He doesn't remember much, but he does remember the kids in that sixth grade class. He remembers thinking, that's the cool crowd. They're older. They wouldn't know who I am. Now, fast forward 40 years or something. That fifth grader is now hosting a podcast about legacy. One of those sixth graders, she just stepped down as CEO of an organization that facilitated over 1 million moments of human connection. Literally, over 1 million seats at Shabbat tables across North America. She built not one, but 2 institutions from the ground up, stayed approximately 11 years at each, and left both of them healthier than when she arrived. And here's the remarkable part. She left with no plan for what comes next. Which raises an interesting question. If you spend your entire adult life building things designed to outlive you, things that explicitly don't need you to continue, what exactly is your legacy? Is it the buildings, the organizations, the 285,000 people whose Friday nights changed because of a platform you created? Or is it something smaller? Something that happens in a fifth grader's memory or of a sixth grader on stage. The moment when someone you barely knew becomes someone you can't quite forget. Here's what I've been thinking about since Aliza agreed to this conversation. That fifth grader in the auditorium had no idea who that sixth grader would become. He had no idea they'd end up in each other's lives decades later, that he'd marry one of her best friends from high school, that they'd become colleagues in the small, strange world of building things that matter. But before that, Aliza had no idea who she would become either. No kid performing in Broadway Comes to Steal knows they're rehearsing for a life of serial institution building. No sixth grader thinks someday I'm going to reimagine ancient Jewish ritual for hundreds of thousands of people and then walk away right at the height of my success. And yet somehow, imperceptibly, we become who we're going to be. The sixth grader becomes the founder, the fifth grader the podcaster, the cool kid you barely knew becomes someone you deeply admire. The question Aliza's life poses is this. If you build something meant to exist without you, what actually remains? If you create the conditions for connection, but then remove yourself from the equation, where does your mark stay? Maybe legacy isn't about making people remember you. Maybe it's about creating conditions where people can remember themselves, who they were, who they're becoming, and what they found meaningful in the space you created for them. And maybe, just maybe, that starts in a school auditorium in Colorado Springs, when a fifth grader looks at a sixth grader on stage and thinks, I wonder who she'll become. I'm Pete Wright, and this is Headstone. Hi, Aliza.
Hi, Pete.
Do you remember any of the lyrics to any of the songs?
I like to be in America. That was my favorite. I got to do the dance. I danced with Ben Scott as a partner, and he was way taller than me. And that made some of the other girls jealous because I'm very, very short. And I always have been. But that meant that I got to dance with anybody. I really vividly remember that. I also remember being very grateful that I was not such a singer, more of a dancer than a singer. So I was not cast in the Memories, the Cats piece where all these sixth grade girls were wearing black leotards and tights. I was not in that piece, and I feel good about that. But I did. Yeah. West Side Story was my big number because I got to do the dance in the front. Huge. I really do remember it. Yep.
I think you got lucky not being in Cats. I don't think it's aged well.
I don't think it wasn't good then either. I mean, it was just rough and Yeah. No.
I got to ask, so so immediately after Steele, you went on and became CEO, executive director and CEO.
That's right. At 12.
At 12 of 2 organizations. So when you're a kid, were When did you realize that you had a natural gift for telling people what to do?
Yeah, I did fairly early. I will just say, I left Steele Elementary School and went to North Junior High, which was socially awkward and totally stressful. But I got to be on the track team, and then I got to be captain of the track team. I think it was one of my first. I wasn't the fastest. Again, I mentioned I'm quite little. So, but the coach saw something in me. And so did the other players. And I got to be the person who motivated people and kept things moving. And I was weirdly responsible for myself and others. I also, I learned that this is, it's part of me. It's like part of my Myers-Briggs type. It's part of every test I've ever taken about my identity is, if I see something like, oh, that could be better or different, I don't hold back in making that suggestion. And sometimes in my life, that's made people really irritated by me. And then sometimes it has opened up enormous and beautiful leadership opportunities. It took me till I was really in my 20s to fully see the benefit of that. But even through high school, I found leadership opportunities through my Jewish youth group, through playing on the soccer team, through, helping continue to be on funny little plays all throughout high school. And I think there was, something in there that enabled me to see both what I was good at, but also what other people were good at and how that complemented me. And that I think I've sort of carried through. At college, I got there and I was like, oh, this is amazing. This is terrible. How can we take what's terrible and make it much better? And it's something in me, as opposed to other people who are like, that's good enough. It's fine. It's fine. They can just shrug and walk away. And I just don't have that in me.
Okay. Sidebar question.
Yeah.
I find it hard to believe that you irritate people, but I feel like we should drill down on that. What is it about you that you find other people tell you is irritating?
Well, I think I can come on hot. I have learned in my 25 years of marriage and other things that, take a breath before you jump in. So when I was, I have a lot of ideas, more ideas than I have time for or words for. And most of my ideas are not great. But I need to get it out of my head, and then I can get the feedback and make it move forward. And sometimes I've had to actively learn to speak less rapidly, to find fewer words to express what is on my mind, and also to take a beat and see how everybody else is doing before I launch in. So literally, now I don't drive because I live in New York City, but when I was in Boston, I would drive to my work and I would have so many ideas by the time I parked the car and came into the office that my inclination was to go straight in and start speaking to my colleagues about, what I would love to accomplish in this moment. And I had to literally take a breath, say, hey, how was your weekend? Right? And build a practice.
This is performative patience. That's what we're talking about right now.
It's a practice. So I think it's a practice that you can work on and cultivate. Yep. And it's probably one of my lifelong practices. I can go right in fast and I want to make sure that I have a culture that does move fast with so many opportunities that we can take advantage of. And I've had to train myself to also make sure everybody's okay. How's everybody doing? That's just not where I go first. And other people are so focused on how's everybody feeling and consensus. That is an incredibly valuable skill. I try to hire that to complement me.
Sure.
But it's also hard for them to be decisive executives. So it's, there's plus minus there.
So you're running track, you're in plays. Do you remember the first time as a kiddo that you realized, oh my God, I could change something?
That's a good question. High school was so filled with my own both certainty and also insecurity that's really what stands out. I really think it took longer than that for me to feel like I had gifts that could actually positively influence. I was so, it's very sweet. You think I was a cool kid in sixth grade. I think somebody else was like, I don't remember myself that way.
Always a bigger fish.
Yeah. And great. And it showed up probably in academic settings the most. This is one of the ways I befriended your brilliant wife, is that, she and I were front row Joes. Like it was amazing to me to find another kid who took learning as seriously as I did.
Right.
And so the teachers responded to me differently than sometimes the other students did. That was exciting for me to kind of learn about crafting my ideas. And I had a history teacher, Kara Buckley, who had just graduated from Brown. She was probably way too green to be teaching, but she was a really hard teacher. She was also the soccer coach, really rigorous. And her line was that nobody could be milquetoast. You had to have a stance. And I have no problem with that. I have lots of stances. If you ask me anything, I will definitely have an opinion on it. And this was the first time that was rewarded. Right. I was pressed to be as articulate as I possibly could about whatever perspective of, this on the Second World War or that was the year that the Berlin Wall came down and was so live and exciting and passionate. And so I learned that I was really good at speaking publicly and clearly. We even had a speech class. Like a lot of the emphasis, I guess, in the 80s was really figuring out how to articulate what's important in a public setting. And that felt very natural to me. So I knew in that case that was comfortable. I remember being stunned by other people who had such stage fright or fear. Like my insecurity that I mentioned before was social, not intellectual or academic or performative. Like I could give me a microphone and I was totally comfortable with that. So that's interesting. To look back in those moments. And I can remember those, probably the advisor meetings in academic settings where people helped me figure out I had some potential in different places that I could see for myself.
That's a fascinating thing to when you realize that the intellectual connection that you make with your high school teachers can last a lifetime, right? I have the same thing. I mean, it wasn't for me. I wasn't academics were not really the top of the thing. Went to a good school, high school. I had a good time and had a lot of, but case by case, my writing teacher, my French teacher, lifelong friendships to the day they passed away. We stayed in contact, and it was because first of the intellectual connection. Right? It was first the academic intellectual connection. And I'll never forget that moment where I graduated high school and my French teacher came up and put his hand, this is minutes after graduation, we're all still in our gowns, put his hand on my shoulder and said, "Congratulations." I said, "Thanks, Mr. Lowell." And he said, "Nope, now it's Chris." And that shook me. That relationship shook me. So talk to me about that. Talk to me about their first intellectual relationships that you still connect to.
Well, when I mentioned Kara, it was interesting to me, and I have not been able to find her, by the way. I've tried on Facebook, so if anybody can find her, that's great. Because a couple of years ago, I was interviewed by my friend Chris Shembra, who has he built an entire business also around bringing people together around dinner called 747. And it's all about positive psychology, practicing gratitude. And so he does an exercise where he asks you to think of somebody who you haven't thought about in a while who had a positive impact on your life. And what would you say to them? And I went right back to Kara. Which I just thought was so interesting, right? Been so many wonderful people who've impacted my life since then. She's certainly not the only one, but I think there's something about being seen at such a vulnerable time of your life as a person with value and a whole person, which was just extraordinary. Honestly, college was a bit disappointing after being at the kind of high school that I was at, because it was and despite being in Colorado Springs, Colorado, I feel like I had one of the greatest educations I possibly could. I'm wearing a Colorado t-shirt for Pete today.
You represent.
I'm representing. Because I think that had such an influence. And also there was behaviors that I wanted to emulate. So we had another teacher who also had a profound impact on me, Eva Heinrichdorf, who had an impact on a lot of people. And I remember her talking about writing. She was a literature professor and teacher, and also encouraged us to develop our own educational philosophy. Like, what is my philosophy toward learning and growing and evolving? And I think that some of my philosophy has been pretty consistent my entire life. Some of it, thank God, has evolved. But one of her lessons was about generosity. All right, she's like, these are words that you are using now and that I'm using, and they're yours. You can use them. I remember working on my college essays with her, and we were talking about, American society. And she said, maybe it's more like a tossed salad than a melting pot. And she's like, you can use that. Those are yours. Those are your words now. And I just like, oh my God, that's so generous. Like, it wasn't plagiarism. It gave me opportunity to be grateful to her. She helped me articulate my idea in more concise language and in creative language. And then I could take that and go from there. So I think that's when I think about leaders or teachers that I look up to and learn from, there is a generosity to them, which I think has an impact on how I like to lead. I don't think you can lead anything, let alone build it from the scratch, if you do it all yourself. When I see people who do everything themselves and are kind of stingy or protective of their ideas or their words, then something is probably not going to grow. She wasn't afraid that I was going to somehow take this language and make money off of it, or I don't know, pretend like it was entirely mine or something like this. She was confident in me that I would use the words well. So That's such a beautiful way of living. It's much more generative, because she also wasn't worried that she was going to run out of words. She had more words coming.
Yeah.
Right? Like that.
Woman was made of words. She was drowning in words.
Right. And that's part of it. Like, I have so many ideas, as I mentioned before. I'd like to be as generous with them as possible. I'm pretty confident there's more coming.
In some respect, I don't have time to stop and get upset about being stingy about ideas and words. I don't have time to think harshly and protectively about them in that way. It is much more joyful to give them up.
And also, if it's just an idea in your head, that's where it'll start and end. If it can come out and be shared with somebody, it could blossom. It could get better. It could iterate. I didn't know the word iterate in junior high and high school, or probably college, or probably till I was like 40. And who knew that I'm like iterate all the time, right? Like I have to just get the idea out, and then I'm excited to have people say, it's an improv game. Like, they want to yes and the heck out of it. Like, that's what's generative to me, is if somebody, if somebody is ready to go in a yes and kind of improv modality with me, then I am full of energy. That's the most energizing thing. And you can't remember whose idea it was in the first place. Now we're talking.
It's ironic that you would so perfectly segue into this next question, which is the other side of generosity, and it is receptivity, right? The ability to say yes to things that are in front of you. You texted me and Kira, and you said with a link to a New York Times piece, an editorial, and you said, "Oh my God, this is me. I'm the Aliza in this piece." Somehow you told Melissa Kirsch, generously giving your idea of On Offer, and she took it and expanded it and wrote a piece in the New York Times about it. I want to hear how this has impacted you, and particularly in how it impacts you sort of improvisationally saying yes to new opportunities and saying goodbye.
So I've been thinking about this so much. The language I have adopted in the last few years is like, oh, if it's on offer, then we're going for it. And I was thinking about this. There's a difference between somebody who takes advantage of exciting things or things that are peculiar or surprising that are around the corner versus a thrill seeker. I do love thrills. I will happily ride a roller coaster. But I don't have like a bucket list of thrills that I'm seeking. I don't need to be in a dangerous situation. That's not part of it at all. Like, it's interesting to me, first of all, like, what is it? It's not that. I have friends who really have that, who really have, and they are really regimented, in fact, about getting to this list. I actually think On Offer is about not being regimented. It is a mindfulness practice, right? So you're walking around and something catches your eye that you hadn't seen before and you pay attention to it and then you follow it. It's a little like Curiouser and Curiouser. I was thinking about this too. Like it's a little Alice in Wonderlandy in the sense of, what's that? And in those moments when I see a plant that I've never seen, or a bird flying, or a weird building, or some interesting graffiti, or the most interesting cake, or what, I feel alive. And that's a really big piece of it. When we talk about like the plus side and the negative side, I can have regret. Like I can be a person who's like, oh, darn it, I should have done that. Or I should have ordered that in a restaurant.
Which is how we learn, right? And so many of these lessons come from that negative space.
Yes. And I'm like, and I have to say, like, I am married a person who doesn't seem to have the regret button.
So weird.
It's so weird. But I do want to do everything. Like I like to do everything. And it's funny, Pete, last night I was looking at some videos from a couple of years ago. I went to Iceland, which was remarkable. And Iceland is full of weird mystery places, like not only giant waterfalls, but if you go to campgrounds, which is what I did, there are these like strange, colorful things. And I walked up to everything to see what it was. And they're giant trampolines. And there they were. I was watching videos of me like jumping on these random ass trampolines because it's on offer. Like, my Bradley, my husband is not like, he's like, I have to jump on that. He does not feel that he has to jump on it. He's like, good, you do you, honey. And I am. And then there was like a weird zip line in the middle. It's like playgrounds in the middle of cities because, it's dark there so much that they light things up. I don't know. I was just like, oh my God, I guess I've been consistent. Like this has been something about me. Like if I am near a body of water and it is at all possible to get into that water, I will. Because I have to, like I am compelled to, right? If somebody is offering a taste of something, a glass of wine or a particular type of food that fits within my dietary restrictions, then I'm going to eat it. Like I don't care if I'm too full. Like there is, I don't want to miss it. Like I don't want to miss these moments. It's like a yes mindset. We talked before about, yes and, which is an improv game I'm sure you could teach us all about, right? If somebody throws something out, you don't poo-poo it, you just yes and you build on it. And this feels very much related to that. It's like it's an optimistic, generative, and creative mindset, I think. And
right.
I have to do it as a practice so that I don't fall into fear of missing out or regret or that. But that what's interesting to me as I've been really reflecting on it is how it's different again from that, like, I want to do these 10 things. It's not that.
It's additive. I love the sort of oppositional thinking around yes and is no but. And I often think, in any given opportunity, am I being a no but right now? Am I being a no but? Do I refuse to see the opportunity on offer? Because sometimes willful ignorance, stubbornness can prevent you from seeing the opportunity on offer. I think the opportunity to say goodbye to the gift of a piece of your career is really important to acknowledge, right? Because that's just as much a generational opportunity as it is a door closing behind you. So let's just go back a little bit to the Anita experience, right? You took this thing based on an essay by Anita Diamant, who said, "Why I want a mikveh." And she puts together a board, and somehow they find you. Then they say, here's this concept. Turn this into a building and a practice. And then, do you know what? How about an institution? And that's insane, Aliza. How did that happen?
Yeah. So I was 29. I will say a couple things that led up to this, which is I am, as a person, have always been kind of seeking out spiritual connection and ritual.
Even as a kid, even as a youth?
Yeah, I think I was just into it. At summer camp, I would sing my heart out. I was like, if you see like a video for like Christian rock or Jewish rock, I was like that geeky kid. That's why it's funny that you thought I was cool. I was, I love the feeling of being in community. I love the music. And also my home life, My mom is an artist. She's a dancer. And my father is a rabbi and a Bible scholar. And so in our home, it was very intentional about how we approached religious ritual and practice. It was beautiful. It was carefully designed. It was like, it was this aesthetically pleasing and delicious. There were fresh flowers and, like it was just, it needed to be a certain way for my mom's aesthetic. And my dad was very creative. He was an early feminist. So the traditional religious roles that normally would have been very gendered were much more fluid in our household. And the guests in our home were often dancers coming through from New York companies. And also basically any Jew or probably religious person, Christian or Muslim, was a guest at our house at some point. So there was also that kind of joy. Like I had such a positive relationship to religious ritual growing up. It was about connection, community, sense of belonging, delight, beauty. Leading up to my 29-year-old time, I had now worked at major legacy institutions. I had worked at startup institutions. I had a master's degree and a bit more confidence that I could create something of meaning. But still it was, I'd never been the executive of something, let alone raise millions of dollars, which is what was needed to get this to happen. And I saw a job posting, I think like in a newspaper or something, because my husband my brand new husband got a job in Boston. We were going to Boston. And Anita Diamond, who had written The Red Tent, which is then an international bestseller. And I had been reading it while actually living in Israel and driving through the desert, and all the scenes took place there. And I just felt very connected to her. And I just wanted to go to interview for that.
Yeah, but then for no other reason than to sit down across from Anita.
I just wanted to meet her. But then I did my research. And I was like, oh my God, nothing like what she has envisioned exists. And that is so interesting. Like, why doesn't it? What are all the barriers to creating something that's beautiful and meaningful? The ritual of mikveh is, it comes from like literally the first chapter of Genesis when God gathers up the water so the dry land may appear. That's the same root. And then there's a notion of going to this pool of water. It's throughout the Bible, like before you become a priest, you got to change your clothes and put on the vestments and all that stuff. And before you do that, you got to do this ritual cleansing. You have baptism that comes from it. Muslims also have something called tahara, like water ritual is really interesting. It's also the last stage if someone is converting to Judaism from any other religion. The presto changeo moment is a ritual immersion in a pool of water. And that was really her motivation. And I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. What could it be? And that was like what I brought to the interview.
Yeah. I think I love your words. You've said it several times. What could it be? You are teaching people what a mikveh could be. Most American Jews, I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that had not heard of it, right? Correct. Or thought that it maybe was something for Orthodox women, right?
Correct.
And so here you are in this position. Anita says yes, board says yes, and your job is cultural translation and fundraising and building design and theological education all at once.
Yes, and a lot of persuasion. This is not at the top of anybody's philanthropic priorities, and it takes millions of dollars. And not only that, but a lot of people have had a negative association with it. So I mentioned, conversion is a reason that a lot of American Jews know about or have connected with mikveh, but also if you adhere to Jewish law, then you don't have sex when you're menstruating. And after you finish your menstrual cycle, you go to this ritual bath before you have sex again with your partners. It's certainly heteronormative in this case. But it can be very beautiful and very painful if you are wanting to get pregnant and having a difficult time. It's just so private. Like there's the overlay with sexuality and fertility and marriage or relationships is so intense that for many cases, this ritual is like mysterious, hidden, misogynistic, complicated, power struggles. Oh my God. I haven't mentioned at all that when you do this ritual, you are not wearing any clothing. So privacy has got to be important and safety. Oh my gosh, so much. So there was, it was endlessly creative, I would say. But God, it was fulfilling. Once we finally opened our doors, I was actually on parental leave. My oldest was born in March, and we opened in May, and I didn't come to the opening because I was on parental leave. And I really wanted that to be sacred. And the staff that I had, thank God, been able to hire, thanks to some of the fundraising efforts that we did, they set it up. They set up the phone systems, they set up the place, and they opened our first visitors. And that was amazing. Like, that was one of the early signs to me that I'm like, okay, I got it. If I don't have to be there, now I know I got it.
Tell me about the relationship of the mikveh to death, to end of life.
So one of the things that's really important, the name that we used for the mikveh in Boston is called Mayyim Hayyim, which literally means living waters, right? And there's a source of water in every single ritual bath that is connected to water that was naturally collected through rain or through a stream or melted snow. There's a real kind of return to that primordial water. So on the one hand, it is incredibly focused on life. But on the other, when you prepare, you do a full physical cleansing. The idea is that the water in the mikveh does not make you physically clean or pure. It's not about dirt. It's a spiritual experience, but it's totally physical. And in order for you to have a proper or kosher immersion, you actually have to sink in the water. It means, by the way, that you have to be able to exhale. If you inhale, you'll fill your lungs and you'll float. So the design challenge is to create a space where people can come in and actually feel so safe and so secure that they can exhale and soften their body and go into the water, which is really akin to drowning for a few seconds. It's a real taste of, I'm not on this earth. I'm not breathing. I'm not interacting. I'm not touching anything. It's a total liminal moment. You are sinking underneath the water before your feet touch the bottom, before you come back up. And then when you come back up, your head crests through the water, and that is, you say a blessing, which is like, oh, thank God I am alive. Thank God I'm here right now. What a blessing to have this opportunity to immerse. And it is the closest thing to a rebirth experience. There's a parallel language to the waters of the mikveh and a womb. Really sort of like the beginning of life. But all of that also implies a closeness to the end of your life. People started coming to the mikveh that we created to celebrate birth and celebration. There's actually a ritual of coming, tradition to come when you're in your 9th month of pregnancy. You're praying for a safe delivery, and you're also thinking about people who're having a hard time to get pregnant, and you're keeping them in mind. It's lovely to feel so buoyant in that moment. And you're also praying to God you're going to be a good parent. And then we also had people who came because they had been diagnosed with a terminal illness. In some cases, thank God, they would come on the anniversary of a diagnosis and they were still alive. But we also had one person, Matthew, who knew that he was dying. And he would come to the mikveh assisted by his brother to really prepare for the end of life. And we learned there are other traditions of when you are caring for somebody who is in the end of their life, how do you take care of your own soul? And you can come and do this ritual to renew your spirit. And when in the most traditional Jewish burials, in the moment after your soul has left your body is taken to the funeral home, and there is basically a type of a mikveh, a shallower mikveh. And there's a process called purification of tahara. And you have volunteers who bathe the body and then put the body in a shroud before the burial. So the notion of the water ritual as both a source of life and renewal and as the ultimate care before the end of life and before burial is really intense. It's all mixed in at the same time.
There is a certain presence to the practice of thinking about death that you're describing here that I don't I don't think people who are not celebrants of, the Jewish ritual, whether they're non-practicing Jews or not Jewish, think about with any great regularity. What does that do to your sort of day-to-day humanity? I walk around the street and I am thinking constantly in terms of the Final Destination movies. Like something horrible is going to happen and it's going to be dominoes, and that's my anxiety talking. But you're sitting here thinking about the real practical, I'm descending under the water, and when I come up, it's the first breath of life.
Yeah. And I'm thinking about how do I design that experience so that people can feel so safe that they can do this, be so vulnerable.
Well, but you do it, though. You do it personally. What is it for you to be present with your death and your life that way?
There's a choice point, right? Like I am not required to do this. I'm choosing to do it. And I can therefore, I imbue it with meaning. The Hebrew for meaning or intentionality is called kavanah. Like the rabbis like of old who have codified everything, they knew that this is just a pool of water, even with the source of rainwater, the living waters. Therefore, in order for this ritual to have meaning and weight, you have to have an intention. And then the invitation is to articulate that intention. I would like to go through this. I want to mark this transition, whether it's just in this moment, it's just preparing for this next stage of my life or this next holiday, or letting go. Then there is in that, it's very empowering. So I feel like there's this marriage between really ancient, deeply rooted ritual and very contemporary emotion, feeling, and need. And when those two can be threaded together, then it's really life enhancing. So if I'm walking down the street, I'm just looking to see how the clouds are formed, or where the sun is peeking through, or if there's any leaves still out there, or what fascinating outfit somebody's wearing on the streets of New York City, which is a guarantee that I'm going to find that. So it's like a different thing that are hunting. And for me, those are all tiny little reminders of aliveness and the divine.
How'd you know it was time to say goodbye?
So there's a few different things. One is, what I look for is other members of the staff and the board to start talking about the culture of the organization without me, when there is like an internalization of it. So I knew at that point, like in terms of Mayyim Hayyim, first of all, I was able to go on an extended sabbatical. I got an amazing fellowship. There was another professional who was ready to go, and she could step in. I worked with a professional coach, and she started working with that coach while I was on leave. And then the three of us started working together. And that was really an invitation to think about her own confidence in making decisions, sometimes consulting me and sometimes not. And I wanted to make sure that her first reaction to any kind of complaint or challenge or whatever would be in the affirmative, right? Like you affirm what is going on with somebody. You approach it with as much grace as possible, and you see if you can say yes rather than no. It's the same, honestly, that I think to me is a real through line to the on offer mentality of, you have to really be responsive to what's in front of you. It's like a difference between reactive and responsive. So that's very high level. Like in terms of nuts and bolts, could they raise money without me being there? Could they, close gifts? Could they manage a broken pipe? Like those kinds of things. If those could happen, that was such an incredible indicator that they didn't need me. And I really remember having the vivid thought that I didn't know if I was totally ready. I was so emotionally connected to that role. It had been a huge decade of my life. Like I had 3 children during that decade. I started in my 20s. I was now in my 40s. Like it was a huge, huge change. And I really remember thinking like, oh, I might need them, but they don't need me the same way. And that was a really interesting awareness. I think that I just really remember that vividly. Like I'm not a serial starter. I'm a serial starter and builder. Like I don't want to just start and then head out. I've done some consulting in this interim phase and I don't particularly care for it.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I'm like, okay, but now what? Like now we get into the hard part, not just the ideas. So I think it was really knowing that other people could really articulate it. And one of the beautiful things about Mayyim Hayyim is, all over the world, people now talk differently about mikveh. And that really is a direct result, in great part, to our effort to make sure that the story was inclusive and creative and generative and loving. And a lot of that really worked. So that continues. I still get people who come and talk to me about the impact of going to a mikveh in some other part of the country as a result of what happened there. So that's a big part of it.
It's why I wanted to spend some time hearing you talk about that experience, because your name is still on the website. It's still in the about, right? There is as I think about often, right? The legacy is when people stop mentioning our names, right? And so I read your name on that website and I see that, Carrie follows up and takes over, and it's thriving right now, but your fingerprint is still on it. Right? Is that important to you?
That's so interesting. What's more important to me is that somebody can go and be guaranteed to have a really welcoming experience. That's the fingerprint that I want. I want, when you design something from scratch, you have the opportunity to put yourself in place of the end user, right? I have my in between Mayyim Hayyim and OneTable, I really got myself immersed in human-centered design. I worked with a coach from IDEO. And so now I'm actually looking back on how we designed Mayyim Hayyim in Boston. And I think we used a lot of design, a lot of human design implements without even knowing. I just didn't have a name for it. But we used to always think about, what does it mean when you are calling to make an appointment or navigating the website or getting out of a car or the nearby subway station, the trolley in Boston. What if you can't walk on your own and you need assistance, or you're in a wheelchair? What if you are hard of hearing or deaf and you need someone to be an interpreter? What if your gender does not match the body in which you were born and you're about to be naked in a religious setting? What does it look like to gain empathy for that experience? That matters the most to me. I wanted to make sure that anybody who worked with as a volunteer or a staff person or donor to Mayyim Hayyim understood the value of an entire institution really reflecting and caring for the end user. If that is the case, then I'm okay. I would say as a Jew, Dayenu, that's enough. That's good enough. That matters the most to me. And then if people find out that I was connected to it, amazing. I can put it on my own resume. It's lovely that they include it, but I don't need them to.
We need to transition to OneTable, because now you're a tech CEO, right? At this point in your life, which I think is awesome and hysterical in its own way. Yeah. And also, OneTable has a sort of lens on it for your life, that it also included an incredibly traumatic experience. Foundationally, tell me about OneTable and your experience sort of setting it up, and then we'll get to the other side of it.
Great. So similar to Mayyim Hayyim, in that there were some individuals and philanthropists who were thinking gosh, what's an amazing Jewish ritual? Friday night dinner, Shabbat dinner. So for any listeners who've never been to one, you're welcome anytime at my house. But basically, every Friday night, that's the beginning of the Sabbath. It begins on Friday Eve and continues through Saturday night. And you start with a candlelit dinner with wine, songs, rituals, pause to say, well, it's the end of this work week and the beginning of this period of rest and joy and connection. There's literally no negatives. It's if you want to sell a product, sell this one. It's much easier to sell than mikveh. I have to say, there was no overcoming barriers. I thought about that so many times. My God, this is easier.
Well, it's so funny you say that, though, because you already described yourself as the challenge that you had was social. And here you are building a platform for people who maybe don't know each other to come together. That does seem challenging to me now. Right.
So the most interesting thing was in our early market research, I remember asking really, really digging to see what we could understand what the negatives were. And the negatives were not the association to the ritual, which they were with mikveh.
Right.
And the negatives were I
don't know how to talk to people.
Well, yeah. Or people are I work until 8 p.m. in finance. How could I possibly host a dinner? Or I don't know how to cook. Or what if people don't come? Or what if I come and I don't know, or the other people in the, it was social. They were almost exclusively social barriers. Some of them were financial barriers. Basically, I was approached at kind of a nadir in my career. So like I had been at Mayyim Hayyim for 11 years. We spent some time in Israel. We moved to New York. I did a couple of very meaningful part-time gigs, but they were not kind of maximizing my potential. And I just didn't know what was next. And then I had this incredible introduction to these philanthropists who were like, we've been looking, we have not found the person. And I think what was attracted them to me was that I didn't already have an idea cooked that I wanted to grow. I wanted to like help them and then figure out what could we grow together. And they gave me like 6 months, to get proof of concept, which is not a whole lot of time to build something that can hopefully grow to 100,000 per year. But we did. So the early market research was, we sent all these young people out. The goal was really focused on, at that time, there was all millennials who were in their 20s and 30s who were experiencing an epidemic of loneliness. They were disassociated from traditional, certainly religious institutions, which all young adults are, but even at higher rates than at previous generations. So it just meant that whatever has worked in the past is no longer working. So this cannot look like things that have already existed. And that was like, ooh, great. Yeah. Great. So what can it be? And I hired 10 observers. So I was 42, not the target population. So these 10 observers were in their 20s and 30s. They spoke multiple languages. They had multiple sexual identities and gender orientations. And they went to lots of different dinners on Friday night. And they were participant observers. And then we would interview them to understand what they were observing. What was like, beautiful points of connection, and what were like the barriers that got in the way. We also did plenty of our own like direct research in terms of interviews and surveys and and then focus groups, and took all of this data to very quickly to start identifying what could we create that would just name every barrier. Oh, finances. Okay, we have got philanthropic support. I don't know who's coming. Okay, there's a RSVP deadline through this platform. I need, food and recipes. Great, that's easy enough. You can also do prepared foods. Like, I don't remember the tune to the blessing that you say before you eat the bread. Great, we can do an audio recording. Like, we started just thinking about boom, boom, boom. And then came the much more interesting challenges of, how do you help people talk to each other? How do you create space? How do you make people feel like, yeah, I can have people over to my own apartment? Like, there was a very countercultural initiative, but the technology that was happening was like Airbnb was taking off. The idea of like people going online to create a personal profile and then invite people into their own space with their profiles. And then, the guest
Suddenly
to become the host.
You didn't have to teach people to do that.
Correct. So I could say we're going to be the Airbnb for Shabbat dinner. And there were also all these social dining platforms that were getting started. And most of them have have come and gone. But we could white label someone else's technology, which means someone had built a platform. This kid had built something called feastly.com. So we were feastly.com/startup Shabbat. Like, it was just like good enough, total prototype. But we did our first 1,000 dinners on that. And that gave us all the data about what to do differently and how to do it for ourselves, and ultimately built our own, tech-enabled social connection platform.
So the first major event, obviously, is COVID. What happens to OneTable? What happens to Shabbat dinners during COVID?
I remember we had 225 dinners on that the Friday, the 13th of March. And I remember we'd had a board meeting literally on the 12th. It's supposed to be like a strategic planning meeting. And, board members were like, this is probably not a good time for strategic planning. I think we have to scrap everything that we were doing, which I appreciated because I was not there. I didn't see it. And then they're like, we should probably cancel all the dinners. I'm like, what? You can't cancel it. These are actually, that's like, what does that mean to cancel a religious experience in someone's home? And how do we do it safely? And that was like, very different question, right? Like, how do we enable these to happen, but in a way that is safe? And obviously, like every other organization, we're like, we tried all different things in terms of the guidelines to make sure, and what was our liability and just all of that stuff. So that was one thing that, it's all hands on deck. I remember our staff, my gosh, we worked a lot to try and figure all that stuff out. Luckily, we had already had a pretty remote team. And we had a lot of us who worked in the office together, but we had a very strong Zoom culture already. So that was an easy transition. But the main thing was before COVID, we had a minimum of people who had to be at a OneTable dinner. You had to have at least 5 people. That was because if you happen to be a couple and you invite another couple, that's nice, but that's not the same as actually opening your table to multiple guests.
Right.
And also,
that's a double date.
That's a double date. And also, if you're leading a ritual, it's fucking uncomfortable and weird to do it with like 2 couples. It's just, you're like, who's going to say it? Right. But once you have a 5th person, suddenly the table gets bigger. The ideal dinner party, by the way, is 8. You put the rowdiest or most interesting person in the middle of the table. I learned
that on Curb Your Enthusiasm, actually.
Yes, so that's correct.
It takes a special person to be a middle.
That's correct. That's correct. Thank you. They were really helpful to us. The 8 from some people are like 8. And so when we first started, people were like, oh, I only have, 5 people coming. I guess I should cancel my dinner. We're like, oh my God, no, don't cancel. Have it with, so we figured out, okay, 5's the minimum. And then COVID hit and we're like, we can't have minimum. Mm-hmm. So we changed it from 5 to 1.
I don't know how to make sense of that right now.
So you could be by yourself and you could be immunocompromised and you could be on Zoom all the time for work. And then here comes Friday night. How do you shift so that you can take a breath, maybe turn off your screen, set your table, which has been your workspace, like clear your workspace, reset the table, and have intention. Oh, what day of the week is it? Remember, it was like Tuesday. We were like, it's Tuesday, and then Shabbat. Right? There's like, oh God, there are 7 days to this week. I can remember that. And Shabbat became this like reminder of what day of the week it was, an opportunity to pause. We launched an entire beautiful video series called Pause Videos with all these out-of-work Broadway performers, Frank mostly. We also did comedians. I mean, there was a lot of amazing things each month to just say, this is a gift from us to you. Remember to pause. The dinners went from that 200 and 250 a week to 400 a week to 500 a week to eventually 700 a week. And solos went up and down. We call them the solo Shabbat. We created a special guide for if like you're literally by yourself. How do you create a meaningful experience? How do you still feel like you're part of a community when you're alone? We did a study called Alone But Not Lonely, because that's what people started telling us, that there's a difference between solitude and loneliness. So that was completely amazing. And then we also kind of loosened our restrictions on how many dinners we could fund. Our board was like, look, this is the rainy day. So better to use up every dollar that we have on hand to support these dinners than be saving for the future right now. Right. And so we did. And so people started building an ongoing regular practice. It became part of the cadence of their lives, and it totally transformed the organization.
It's so beautiful. And you can feel, just hearing you talk about it, you can feel the sort of emergent behavior of heart and spirit that comes out of this for people who have been involved in it and have taken advantage of it. And so I've got to ask the difficult sort of question, and you can take this wherever you want to take it. October 7th happens during your last year at OneTable. You see participation spike, right? At that point, people come to Shabbat tables in numbers that you haven't experienced, and they needed what you built, and then it was time for you to leave OneTable. I am not, I'll say, directly suggesting that those things are connected, but kind of were they? And how did this inflection point of global unrest impact your spirit for the work?
Yeah. So it's a really good, hard question. So as you mentioned, there was like a surge in interest and activity in people coming together, even that first Friday after October 7th. So if we had been at 500 dinners on average. We went to 600 to 700 very quickly, all over the place. People who had participated in OneTable and then sort of built their own practice and just started using it without the technology, they came back. There was a real return. There was a huge time of first-time hosts who were like, oh my gosh, now I can do this. There were dinners that were very specific to say, we are going to do, this is what we're going to talk about, this is what we're not going to talk about at the dinners in terms of current events, the war in Israel and Gaza, anti-Semitism. It was top of mind for everybody. And some people really leaned into it. And some people really chose to carve out this time as sacred. So that's what was happening on the ground. And I felt really good that OneTable wasn't able to create that platform for people to come together when they really needed to. Inside the Jewish community, let alone external, like you'd think we have enough headwinds externally that we would be coming together internally. But unfortunately, that's not always the case. And so the people's responses, some certainly predated October 7th, but there's a lot of generational divide in terms of the relationship with Israel and Israel-Palestine, and what is the role of an organization in terms of creating a platform for people to come together, how much of it is also ideological and how much of it is actually pluralistic. And so a lot of those, we had so many of those kinds of conversations and discussions. There was just a research that just came out about people who work full-time in the Jewish community and how many of them are feeling hopeless and not hopeful. It's a really challenging time. And I think that also was sort of depleting energy for people. Not everybody acted with grace. That was one of my first things to really focus on. It became more and more clear that it was also time. It was, how could I be graceful to myself and to others? Meaning finding in them, like treating them with goodwill. How might people treat me and other leaders or young adults with grace, and assuming that they have goodwill? And I think our well for grace was really tapped. I think it's slowly but surely filling back up again. But that's one way I would articulate it. And also I'll say, I work on contracts, and it was time for me to renew my contract. And that's such a fascinating thing. I'm like, oh, do I have another 3 years in me, 4 years in me, 1 year in me? Like, what is left in me in this? And also, do they need me or do I need them? And it was really that same question that had come up when I was ready to leave Mayyim Hayyim, right? So I had been able to take an extended leave of absence, again, a 3-month sabbatical. They did fine. They did great in my absence. I remember speaking to the founder of Meetup about like the first 100 interviews that he did. And he was trying to sell Meetup to them, like explain what this platform was. And then the 100th person did all the talking and explained to Scott Heiferman, who is the founder, what the organization was. Like the job candidate told Scott, and Scott's like, oh my God, that's a difference. And, we had hundreds of people applying for jobs and telling me and us what the organization was, what it meant to them. So that was also, I'm like, okay, that cultural piece that is so important to me, they don't need me to do that. That is, people are coming with that attitude. I have very little to do with the day-to-day operation. And I found myself also really drawn towards our newer offerings, expanding to different populations, white labeling our own technology, things that are really important to the mission, but are not the same core product. I'm like, oh, it's probably good for the CEO to be as in love with the core product as she is with the newer efforts. And so that was also kind of an indicator for me. I'm like, okay, I may have hit my strength, and they could maybe really benefit also from someone coming in with even with a different, renewed energy. But it was a huge loss. In both cases, it was, it's a big loss because my identity is so tied up. But my successor has been hired. She's doing great. I love when people tell me how wonderful she is. I'm sure significant changes will be made. But so far, it's been 9 months and the dinner numbers continue to be high. The value is beautiful. I'm watching all their social media. We did a big study with the Templeton Charitable Foundation, which is an international foundation. It's actually a Christian foundation, about the connection between Shabbat dinner and social connectedness, with an amazing research team, interdisciplinary, including and led by Julianne Holt-Lundstad, who is a world-renowned expert on social connectedness and loneliness. She's at Brigham Young University. And that's coming out now. That was hard to not be there for, but they brought me back in to do the video for it. And so there's some moments that I'm so, so proud. But our community is still reeling.
Well, it seems so much to me like the events of October 7th did almost as much to unveil some pretty radical misunderstandings of homogeneity in the Jewish community, some assumptions. And I mean, you said it, right? Like there are vastly differing opinions on culture, community, spirituality, the rigor of our of the work that people do together, and those they seem like now they are spoken. Now they are the things that are showing where the division exists. And I think as an outsider of that community, it's fascinating to watch. It's been fascinating to watch your journey because as practical as everything you're saying about, the new person is there and she's doing great, and that's all awesome.
Yeah.
But what I'm really hearing from you is it changed what was urgent for Aliza. It changed the things that you were hearing and how you were internalizing them. It changed the how you see how people talk to each other in and out of conflict.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big change to acknowledge.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's why, I spent the first couple of months after I left immersed in study about the concept of grace, which is this like mysterious gift, a divine gift that we have within us to see the good in others, even people that we really don't seem, that seem to be just wholly evil. Like, what does it mean? And that the teaching is that if you yourself can see that good, even a tiny bit of good in somebody else, that means they are deserving of reflection, return, improvement. But you can't get it to someone else unless you do it for yourself, which is sometimes even harder. And that has been really interesting for me to unpack and teach about and explore and kind of bring to light.
And internalize.
And
right?
internalize.
Like, good morning, new Aliza, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's it. The on offer is consistent. The grace piece is an evolution.
There's always, everybody's got their roller coaster.
Yes.
Everybody's got it.
Yes.
That's all right.
Yes.
Okay. Well, we have to get here at some point. I am fascinated by how you have spun this concept of on offer, this principle, this practice of on offer as a way to say hello and say goodbye and move on from opportunities and discover what's next. Of course, the show is called Headstone. When I started thinking about having you on, I wondered if the title would land differently for you than past guests, because I know that the Jews have a specific relationship with headstones, right? Like there's this unveiling ceremony, there are inscriptions, they're in Hebrew, the tradition of placing stones. Like I'm up on it.
All right, nice job.
I could place a stone. So I got to ask you, when people come to visit your headstone, years go by, they're still saying your name because they left your name on the website. You can't get rid of it.
And there's still a website.
Yeah, it's still a website. And people come and stop at your headstone and say, I was here, you are remembered, right? What do you want carved there? It's not your LinkedIn URL. It's not your resume. It's not your accomplishments. What do you want people to say about the way you moved through the world?
I thought about this. I had a guess that you were going to ask me. I was thinking about, it's funny to talk about yourself in past tense, first of all, an amazing exercise. Because I think one of the questions is like, is it like a blessing for others who are seeing it, or is it about you? And if it's the first, then it's be guided by grace, or let grace lead. But if it's the second, then I think it's she brought a vision of joy and connection, and then she built it.
I got to admit, I'm glad your husband's influence did not step in here. Those are both beautiful, and neither are a limerick.
Neither are a limerick.
Bless you. Bless you, bless you, Aliza Kline. Thank you, dear Aliza, for doing this. I know it is a crazy concept, and you are delightfully vulnerable to sit here and have these conversations and tell me about your incredible experience. You're a light.
Thanks, Pete.
There is a paradox in the kind of legacy that I've been talking about with Aliza as I edit this episode and reflect on this conversation. We spend our lives trying to build things that last, are these organizations and rituals and communities and things that'll continue long after we're gone. But if we do it well, we also build ourselves right out of the story. Aliza's gift isn't the structures she's left behind, it's her willingness to leave them, to trust that they can thrive without her, to understand that sometimes letting go is the most enduring act of creation. So we talk about legacy as a noun, but here's an act of grammatical anarchy that I encourage you to work into your discussions today. What if legacy is a verb? What if it's something you do again and again? Each time you hand off responsibility, each time you open space and say, this is yours now. Maybe that's how we live on, not through what bears our name, but through the rooms we've made where others can find their own reflection, where we legacy together. Yeah, that sounds weird. Probably don't do that, but try it. See if it works for you. Anyway, when I think about Aliza's life, I don't think about buildings or websites or communities. I think of water, alive and fluid and moving through time. The mark isn't what remains when it's gone. The mark is the flow itself. I'm Pete Wright, and I'll see you next time, right here around the headstone.